Imagine a universe where humanity is the newcomer, the young, reckless species that everyone expects to cower when real danger arrives. For centuries, advanced civilizations have dismissed Earth as a backwater planet populated by primitive beings who barely escaped their own atmosphere. But, what happens when the galaxy's most powerful alliance faces annihilation, and their desperate cry for help reaches the one species everyone underestimated? What happens when Earth doesn't just answer that call, but arrives with a battle fleet that rewrites the rules of galactic warfare? This is the story of how humanity's greatest weakness became the galaxy's salvation, and how a species known for its chaos and unpredictability became the last hope for cosmic civilization itself. The distress signal was meant for anyone. It was answered by everyone's worst nightmare and best hope. Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Defense Coalition stared at the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers filled the holographic projection like drops of blood spreading through water. Each marker represented a coalition fleet that had been destroyed, vaporized, or simply vanished into the endless dark of space. "Sir, we've lost contact with the 7th Fleet," reported Commander Ilex, her blue-scaled hands trembling as she worked the communications console. Their last transmission was screaming. The voidlings had come without warning, emerging from the space between galaxies like a plague of living darkness. No one knew what they wanted. No one understood their technology. All anyone knew was that they consumed everything in their path: planets, ships, entire star systems, leaving behind only empty space where civilizations had thrived for millennia. Zethkar's 4 eyes swept across the bridge of the Coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance. His crew represented the best of 50 different species, each one a master of their respective field. The Coalition had never faced a threat they couldn't overcome through unity and superior technology. Until now. "How many fleets do we have left?" Zethkar asked, though he feared the answer. 7, sir. Out of 43. Commander Ilex's voice cracked. The Andromedan defense grid is requesting immediate evacuation. They estimate 12 hours before the voidlings reach their core worlds. 12 hours. Zethkar had spent 3 centuries building the Coalition into the galaxy's premier peacekeeping force. Now it would be swept aside in less than a standard day. The irony wasn't lost on him: they had achieved perfect unity among the stars just in time to be annihilated together. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Brax from the sensor station. "I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions in the outer rim. The voidling swarm it's bigger than we thought. Much bigger." Zethkar closed his eyes. He had hoped their intelligence estimates were wrong, that perhaps they were facing a scouting force rather than a full invasion. Those hopes crumbled like ancient bone. "Commander Ilex, open a channel to all remaining Coalition forces. Emergency frequency." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Every eye was on their admiral, waiting for the words that would either rally them to victory or send them to their deaths with dignity intact. "This is Admiral Zethkar to all Coalition forces," he began, his voice carrying across light years of space to reach every surviving ship. "The enemy has proven more formidable than our projections indicated. We have fought with honor, but we cannot prevail through conventional means." He paused, gathering strength for what came next. "I am authorizing Protocol 77 Alpha. Broadcast an open distress signal on all frequencies, all languages, all communication methods. Every species in this galaxy and beyond must know what approaches. Perhaps someone, somewhere, has the knowledge or capability to succeed where we have failed." Protocol 77 Alpha was the Coalition's ultimate admission of defeat, a desperate plea for help from anyone who might be listening. It had never been used in the Coalition's 1,000-year history. Most species considered it a theoretical embarrassment, a safety valve that would never actually be pulled. "Sir," Commander Ilex hesitated. "The emergency protocols specifically exclude certain, problematic species. The humans, for instance. Their planet is classified as a developing world with restricted contact privileges." Zethkar had heard of humans, though he'd never encountered one personally. The reports painted them as a chaotic species that had somehow achieved faster-than-light travel despite constant warfare among their own kind. Coalition observers described them as unpredictable, violent, and prone to irrational decision-making. Most galactic powers considered them an embarrassment to civilized society. "Commander, when you're drowning, you don't refuse a rope because you dislike the person throwing it. Send the signal to everyone." "Everyone." "Yes, sir." Ilex's fingers danced across her console.
Open distress signal broadcasting on all frequencies.
I'm including tactical data, enemy capabilities, and our current defensive positions. The signal raced outward from the eternal vigilance at the speed of light, carrying the Coalition's desperate plea into the void. It would reach the nearest star systems within hours, but distant civilizations might not receive it for days or weeks. By then, the galaxy might be nothing but empty space and voidling hunger. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the voidling fleet," Lieutenant Brax reported.
"They're charging some kind of weapon. The power levels are impossible." On the main display, the voidling swarm appeared as a writhing mass of organic technology.
Their ships looked more grown than built, with surfaces that pulse like living tissue and weapons that seemed to breathe. The largest vessels stretched for hundreds of kilometers, dwarfing even the Coalition's mightiest dreadnoughts.
"All ships, evasive maneuvers," Zethkar ordered.
"Prepare for the voidling weapon fired." It wasn't an energy beam or a projectile.
It was something far worse, a wave of nothingness that erased matter at the quantum level.
The Coalition's Third Fleet, holding position near the Rigel system, simply ceased to exist. One moment there were 18 ships and 30,000 souls. The next moment there was empty space.
"Dear gods," whispered Commander Ilex. "They didn't even leave debris."
Zethkar felt his species' equivalent of cold sweat beating on his carapace.
The Coalition's most advanced shields might as well be tissue paper against that weapon. Nothing in their technological arsenal could counter it.
"Sir, incoming transmission from the Outer Rim monitoring stations," reported the communications officer.
"They're reading hundreds of voidling ships approaching from multiple vectors.
The invasion force is spreading across 1,000 light-year front."
1,000 light-years. The voidlings weren't just attacking the Coalition, they were attacking the entire galaxy.
Every world, every civilization, every form of life would face the same terrible choice: submit to consumption or face extinction.
"How long until they reach the core worlds?" Zethkar asked.
"At their current speed, approximately 72 hours, sir."
72 hours to save a galaxy.
Zethkar had commanded fleets through pirate raids, territorial disputes, and the occasional rogue AI uprising. None of those experiences had prepared him for this.
"Admiral," Commander Ilex called out. "I'm receiving acknowledgement signals from our distress call."
The Arcturus Federation confirms they received our transmission.
"The crystal mines of Sapphira are analyzing the tactical data. The nomadic fleets are, wait."
She paused, her scaled brow furrowing as she studied her console.
"Sir, this is odd. I'm getting a response from the Sol system.
The humans are acknowledging our distress call."
"What exactly are they saying?" "Just. Message received. En route. ETA 17 hours. That's all."
Zethkar felt a flutter of something that might have been hope, though he couldn't understand why.
What could one primitive species possibly do that the combined might of the Coalition couldn't accomplish? 17 hours? Lieutenant Brax looked up from his station.
"Sir, the Sol system is over 300 light-years from our position. Even with the most advanced hyperdrive technology, the journey should take at least 40 hours.
"Perhaps their calculations are incorrect," Zethkar suggested.
"Or they're unfamiliar with proper astrogation."
"Sir."
The tactical officer's voice cut through the bridge chatter.
"Voidling forces are accelerating. They'll reach Andromeda Prime in 18 hours, not 72.
The hope that had flickered in Zethkar's chest died. Even if the humans possessed some miraculous technology, they would arrive to find only empty space and voidling victors. "All ships, fall back to defensive position Theta," he ordered.
"We'll make our stand at the galactic core.
If this is where the Coalition dies, we'll ensure our final battle becomes legend." The remaining Coalition fleets began their retreat toward the galaxy's center, where the massive black hole called Sagittarius A** warped space and time around its event horizon. It was the galaxy's most dangerous region, but also its most defensible.
The gravitational distortions would limit the voidlings' maneuverability.
As the eternal vigilance jumped to hyperspace, Zethkar found himself thinking about the human response.
Such brevity was almost insulting.
No offers of technological assistance, no requests for additional intelligence, no diplomatic pleasantries. Just a simple acknowledgement and an impossible arrival time. Perhaps that was for the best. When the galaxy ended, at least every species would know the coalition had tried everything, even reaching out to violent primitives in their desperation. The hyperspace jump concluded 18 hours later, depositing the coalition survivors near the galactic core. The view through the main display was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. The supermassive black hole dominated the center of the screen, its accretion disk painting space in brilliant oranges and purples. Gravitational lensing bent light into impossible patterns, creating a kaleidoscope of distorted stars. "All ships report ready for final battle," Commander Ilix announced. "We have 7 fleets, approximately 800 ships total. 800 ships against 1,000 light-year invasion force. The mathematics of extinction were simple enough." "Sir," Lieutenant Brax called out, "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions approaching from the direction of the Sol system." "The humans?" Zethkar found himself hoping despite logic. "How many ships?" That's impossible, sir. I'm reading thousands of contacts." "No, tens of thousands. The spatial distortions are off the scale." "Clarify, Lieutenant. How many human ships are approaching?" Lieutenant Brax ran the sensor sweep 3 times before answering. When he spoke, his voice carried a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Sir, I'm reading approximately 50,000 human vessels approaching at impossible speeds. And, Admiral, they're not slowing down." Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHSF Indomitable, watching the tactical displays update in real time as humanity's response to the galactic distress call materialized from hyperspace. Around her, the largest fleet in human history dropped out of faster-than-light travel with the precision of a military parade. "Contact established with the coalition forces," reported Commander Jackson from the communications station. "They're requesting identification and tactical coordination." Sarah almost smiled. After 17 hours of traveling through folded spacetime, the galactic community was still concerned with proper protocols. It reminded her of the bureaucratic mindset that had nearly prevented Earth from responding to the distress call in the first place. The emergency session of the United Human Space Force High Command had been chaotic even by human standards. Half the admirals wanted to ignore the coalition's plea entirely, arguing that humanity owed nothing to species that had consistently refused first contact. The other half saw an opportunity to prove human capability on the galactic stage. Sarah had cut through the debate with a single question: how many innocent people are about to die while we discuss politics? "Admiral, the coalition flightship is hailing us directly," Commander Jackson announced. "Their leader wants to speak with our commanding officer." "Put him through." The main screen flickered, displaying the alien bridge of what appeared to be their most advanced vessel. The creature addressing her looked like a cross between a mantis and a crab, with 4 eyes arranged around a chitinous head. When he spoke, the universal translator gave him a deep, resonant voice. "This is Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Defense Coalition. I must admit surprise at the size of your response force. Our intelligence suggested humanity possessed limited spacefaring capability." Sarah studied the alien admiral with interest. Even through the language barrier and species differences, she could read exhaustion and desperation in his posture. This was a commander who had watched his forces get systematically destroyed and was now grasping at any hope, however unlikely. "Admiral Zethkar, I'm Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Force. We received your distress signal and came as quickly as possible. What's our tactical situation?" "Frankly, Admiral Chen, the situation is hopeless. The Voidlings possess technology that can erase matter at the quantum level. Our weapons cannot penetrate their defenses, and our shields cannot stop their attacks. We estimate approximately 3 hours before their main force reaches this position." Sarah nodded, studying the tactical data streaming across her personal display. The Voidling ships were unlike anything in human combat doctrine, organic designs that defied conventional engineering principles. Their weapons' signatures showed energy outputs that would normally require antimatter reactions, yet they produced no detectable radiation. "Admiral Zethkar, with respect, your assessment assumes conventional warfare principles. Humanity doesn't always fight conventionally." The alien admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. "I don't understand. The laws of physics are universal. Superior technology combined with overwhelming numbers equals victory." "That's where you're wrong," Sarah replied. "You're thinking like a civilized species.
Humans have spent our entire history finding ways to beat superior enemies through tactics the enemy never considered.
She gestured to her tactical officer.
Lieutenant Torres, show Admiral Zethkar our fleet composition.
The screen split, displaying the human armada in all its chaotic glory.
Unlike the Coalition's uniform vessel designs, humanity's fleet looked like a collection of military experiments gone wild. Sleek destroyers flew alongside massive carrier vessels.
Stealth frigates maintained formation with ships that seemed to be nothing but armor and weapons.
Some vessels looked traditional, while others appeared to have been designed by lunatics. Admiral Chen, Zethkar said slowly, your ships, they don't follow any recognizable design pattern.
Every human vessel is built for a specific tactical role, Sarah explained.
We don't believe in standard templates.
That ship there, the ugly one that looks like a flying warehouse, carries enough firepower to crack a moon.
The small, fast ones you probably dismissed as scouts? Each one can generate a localized singularity.
She paused, letting that information sink in.
And those ships that look like metal spiders? They're not ships at all. They're mobile manufacturing platforms that can build new vessels during combat. Admiral Zethkar's four eyes widened. During combat? That's impossible. The engineering challenges alone are irrelevant when you're about to be extinct, Sarah finished. Admiral, I need you to understand something about humanity. We've never had the luxury of fighting fair.
Every war in our history has been won by the species that could adapt faster, think more creatively, and ignore conventional wisdom when survival was at stake. Before Zethkar could respond, alerts began sounding across both bridges. Lieutenant Torres looked up from her station, her expression grim. Admiral, voidling forces are dropping out of hyperspace. Range, 50,000 kilometers and closing. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded battle. This was the moment when theories became reality, when all the preparation and planning either succeeded or failed spectacularly. All ships, assume formation Delta 7. Activate cloaking systems on stealth units. Manufacturing platforms, begin production of ammunition and support drones. She turned back to Zethkar. Admiral, I need your ships to fall back to minimum safe distance. What we're about to attempt will be dangerous to any vessel not equipped with gravitational shielding.
Admiral Chen, what exactly are you planning? Sarah's expression hardened. We're going to teach these voidlings why humanity earned the nickname, the species that doesn't know when to quit.
The first wave of voidling ships emerged from hyperspace like a living nightmare. Each vessel pulsed with organic energy, their biomechanical hulls shifting and flowing as if alive. Sarah counted at least 300 enemies in the initial formation, with more arriving every second.
Tactical analysis, Lieutenant Torres. Their ships range from frigate class to super dreadnought equivalents.
The largest vessels show power outputs equivalent to small stars. Admiral, their weapon systems are charging.
I'm reading the same quantum erasure signature that destroyed the Coalition fleets. Time until they're in firing range? 90 seconds, Admiral. Sarah activated the fleet-wide communication channel.
50,000 human ships waited for her orders, their crews ready to either save the galaxy or die trying.
All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today we face an enemy that believes it cannot be defeated.
They've conquered civilizations that fought by the rules, species that relied on superior technology and conventional tactics. She paused, watching the voidling formation close the distance. Their largest ship was easily 10 times the size of any human vessel.
But they've never fought humans. They don't know about Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off an army. They don't know about the Alamo, where outnumbered defenders chose death over surrender. They don't know about Britain standing alone against the Nazis, or the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, or any of the 1,000 times humanity has looked into the face of certain defeat and decided to fight anyway. The tactical display showed 30 seconds until weapons range. Today, we add a new chapter to that legacy. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten everything we protect. All ships, attack pattern Omega. Show them why humans are the most dangerous species in the universe. The human fleet erupted into motion with a coordination that belied its chaotic appearance. The massive carrier vessels launched clouds of fighter craft while the destroyer squadrons accelerated toward the enemy at impossible speeds. The manufacturing platforms began vomiting newly constructed vessels into space, adding to the fleet's numbers even as battle commenced. Admiral Chen called out Sethkar over the communication channel, "Your tactics make no sense.
You're attacking a superior force head-on with no defensive formations."
Sarah watched as the first human ships closed with the Voidling fleet.
Admiral Sethkar, you're still thinking like someone who has something to lose.
We're already dead, we just haven't stopped fighting yet. The Voidlings fired their quantum erasure weapons at the approaching human ships. Beams of nothingness lanced out, designed to unmake matter at the fundamental level. They struck the lead destroyers and nothing happened.
The human ships passed through the erasure beams without even slowing down.
What? Lieutenant Brax stared at his sensors in disbelief. How are their ships surviving quantum erasure?
Sarah permitted herself a small smile.
Because we've been expecting this exact attack for 3 centuries. The truth was simpler than the physics involved. Human scientists had theorized about quantum-level weapons since the early days of space travel.
Every human ship carried shielding designed to counter attacks that unmade matter itself, not because they expected to face such weapons, but because human paranoia demanded preparation for every possible threat. All ships, the enemy's primary weapons are ineffective. Proceed with close-quarters engagement. The first wave of human fighters reached the Voidling formation and began their attack.
Instead of energy weapons or kinetic projectiles, they deployed something far more insidious: swarms of self-replicating nanobots programmed to dismantle any technology they encountered.
The Voidling ships began to dissolve.
"Impossible," breathed Admiral Sethkar. "They're using molecular disassembly weapons in active combat."
"The risk to their own forces is acceptable," Sarah finished.
"Every human ship carries countermeasures against our own nanobots.
We've been preparing for wars against ourselves for so long that fighting aliens is almost refreshing." The Voidling formation began to break apart as panic spread through their ranks. Their biomechanical ships tried to regenerate the damage, but the nanobots adapted faster than the organic technology could evolve. What had been a disciplined invasion fleet became a mob of dying vessels.
"Second wave incoming," reported Lieutenant Torres.
"This formation is larger, over 1,000 ships."
Sarah nodded. The easy part was over. Now came the real test of human adaptability.
"All ships, initiate tactics package Bravo."
Time to show them what we learned from studying their first attack. The second wave of Voidlings had learned from their comrades' destruction.
Instead of relying on quantum erasure weapons, they deployed energy fields that disrupted electronic systems and weapons that fired projectiles at near light speed. Their biomechanical hulls adapted in real time, becoming resistant to the nanobots that had destroyed the first wave.
Sarah watched with professional interest as the enemy adapted. Most species would have continued using the same failed tactics until they were destroyed. The Voidlings were learning and evolving their approach mid-battle.
Unfortunately for them, they were fighting humans.
Manufacturing platforms, begin production of counter-adapted nanobots. Stealth squadrons, deploy gravitational mines. All heavy cruisers, charge antimatter weapons.
"Admiral," called out her executive officer, "the antimatter weapons haven't been fully tested. The power requirements could overload ARC." "Commander Williams, we're fighting to save the galaxy.
This is not the time for safety protocols." The second wave of human attacks began with invisible gravitational mines that warped spacetime around the Voidling ships.
Instead of destroying them outright, the mines created localized distortions that prevented the biomechanical hulls from adapting their defensive systems. While the enemy ships struggled with constantly changing gravitational fields, the heavy cruisers fired their experimental antimatter weapons. Each shot was essentially a controlled Big Bang, a pocket of creation-level energy that overwhelmed any defense through sheer impossibility. "Third wave detecting and approaching," Torres announced.
"This one's different. They're using some kind of temporal displacement technology." Sarah frowned. Temporal weapons were theoretical even by human standards. If the Voidlings could manipulate time itself. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions Alpha through Gamma.
Deploy chrono anchors and activate temporal stabilizers." Of course, humanity had theoretical defenses against time manipulation. Human physicists had spent centuries developing countermeasures for weapons that didn't exist yet, just in case they ever needed to fight someone with mastery over time itself. The battle continued for 6 hours, with each wave of Voidlings presenting new and increasingly impossible challenges. They deployed weapons that attacked ships through alternate dimensions, energy beams that traveled backward through time, and biomechanical viruses that attempted to convert human technology into voidling biomass. Humanity countered each attack with equipment and tactics that no reasonable species would have prepared in advance.
Dimensional anchors prevented cross-reality attacks.
Temporal feedback loops disrupted time-based weapons.
Adaptive AI systems immune to biological conversion protected human technology from bioviruses. Admiral Chen, Zefkar called out during a brief lull in the fighting, "How did you prepare for all this? How did humanity develop countermeasures for weapons that shouldn't exist?"
Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead, studying the tactical display as the fourth wave of voidlings prepared their assault. "Admiral, humans have spent our entire history preparing for wars against ourselves. We've imagined every possible way to destroy our own species, then developed defenses against those methods. When you've planned for fighting humans, fighting aliens becomes relatively straightforward. The fourth wave attacked with weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them essentially impossible to target with conventional sensors. Their ships phased in and out of reality, striking without warning and disappearing before return fire could be coordinated."
Sarah had been expecting something like this. "All ships, activate multidimensional targeting systems.
Engineering crews, begin installing quantum entanglement scanners on all weapons platforms."
The human fleet's response was swift and devastating.
Their multidimensional sensors could track targets across 17 different planes of existence, while the quantum entanglement scanners allowed weapons to hit targets that were technically in different universes.
"How?" Zefkar asked in amazement as the fourth wave was systematically destroyed. "How do you have weapons that can target multidimensional entities?"
"Because 300 years ago, human physicists got drunk and started arguing about whether it was possible to fight a war against interdimensional invaders," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "The theoretical weapons they designed that night became standard equipment 50 years later. By the time the fifth wave of voidlings approached, their tactics had evolved beyond anything the Coalition had faced. These ships existed partially outside normal spacetime, attacked through quantum tunneling, and used weapons that fired negative energy capable of destroying the concept of matter itself." Sarah looked at the enemy formation and realized they were facing something that might actually be beyond human capability to counter. Then, she smiled. "All ships, prepare for Protocol Omega Omega Omega. Authorization Chen 77 Alpha." A collective gasp went up from her bridge crew. Protocol Omega 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 was the most insane tactic in human military doctrine, a strategy so dangerous that using it required authorization from Earth's highest command authority. "Admiral," Commander Williams said quietly, "that protocol has never been tested. The theoretical consequences are preferable to galactic extinction," Sarah finished.
"All ships, stand by for reality modification." Admiral Zefkar watched in growing disbelief as the human fleet prepared for something called reality modification. The Coalition's most advanced sensors couldn't even begin to analyze what the human ships were doing.
Energy signatures spiked beyond measurable levels, spacetime itself began to ripple around their vessels, and several laws of physics appeared to be having nervous breakdowns.
"Admiral Chen," he called out over the communication channel, "what exactly is reality modification?" Sarah Chen's image on the screen looked surprisingly calm for someone about to attempt something that sounded like the premise of a cosmic horror story. "Admiral Zefkar, humanity has always had one advantage over every other species we've encountered. When faced with an impossible situation, we changed the definition of possible." She turned to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant Torres, confirm all ships have activated their reality anchors." "Confirmed, Admiral." "All vessels report ready for localized physics modification." Zefkar felt his chitinous shell begin to tingle with electromagnetic interference. Around the Coalition fleet, space itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something unprecedented to occur. The fifth wave of voidling ships approached with weapons that existed in negative space and shields that operated on inverted physics. Their biomechanical hulls had evolved beyond matter as traditionally understood, becoming something that was simultaneously organic technology and living mathematics. "Initiate Protocol Omega Omega Omega," Sarah commanded. The human fleet didn't attack the voidlings. Instead, they attacked reality itself. Energy beams lanced out from the human ships, but, instead of targeting enemy vessels, they struck the fabric of spacetime. Where the beams hit, the fundamental laws of physics began to change. Gravity reversed direction. The strong nuclear force became repulsive. Light began moving at different speeds depending on its color.
"By the void," whispered Commander Ilex, staring at her sensor readings.
"They're rewriting the laws of physics in localized areas." The effect on the Voidling fleet was immediate and catastrophic.
Ships that relied on exotic physics found themselves operating in regions where their technology was not just ineffective but impossible. Vessels that existed partially outside normal spacetime were suddenly forced entirely into conventional reality, where human weapons could target them.
How? Admiral Zethkar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Sarah's expression was grim.
Humanity spent 2 centuries developing weapons to fight wars that couldn't be won through conventional means.
We theorized that if you could control the fundamental forces that govern reality, you could make any enemy's advantages irrelevant.
She gestured to the tactical display, where Voidling ships were dissolving as the physics that sustained them ceased to function. The problem was that reality modification requires enormous amounts of energy and creates significant risks of cascading collapse.
We could accidentally destroy the universe we're trying to save. Then, why use it? Because the alternative is certain extinction for every living thing in the galaxy.
The 5th wave of Voidlings lasted less than 10 minutes against localized physics modification. Their impossible technologies became nearly improbable, then ineffective, then non-existent. Ships that had been untouchable became vulnerable to conventional human weapons, which proved quite capable of destroying enemies operating under normal physical laws. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Torres, "long-range sensors are detecting the main Voidling fleet approaching.
Estimated time of arrival, 47 minutes.
Sarah studied the incoming sensor data and felt her confidence waver for the first time since the battle began. The main fleet consisted of over 50,000 ships, many of them larger than anything they'd faced so far. Worse, the enemy had clearly been observing the battle and learning from each failed wave.
"Fleet status report," she ordered.
78% of our ships remain combat effective, Commander Williams responded. Ammunition reserves are at 60%. The manufacturing platforms are operating at maximum capacity, but they can't replace losses fast enough if we face sustained combat.
Sarah nodded, running calculations in her head.
Humanity had proven they could defeat any individual Voidling tactic, but the enemy's main advantage had always been numbers.
Even human adaptability had limits when facing 50-1 odds.
"Admiral Chen," Admiral Zethkar called out, "our long-range scanners show additional Voidling forces approaching from multiple vectors.
The main fleet is just the beginning.
They appear to be committing their entire invasion force to this battle." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge's environmental systems. The Voidlings had decided that humanity represented an existential threat to their expansion.
They were abandoning their galaxy-wide offensive to concentrate everything against the human fleet. How many ships total? Conservative estimate, 200,000 vessels. They're pulling forces from across the galaxy. 200,000 ships. Even if every human vessel could destroy 4 enemies before being eliminated, they would still be overwhelmed.
The mathematics of the situation were undeniable.
Unless. "Commander Williams, do we still have the experimental vessels in the reserve fleet?" Williams consulted his tactical display. "Yes, Admiral. The prototype ships are maintaining position in hyperspace, awaiting deployment orders." Sarah made a decision that would either save the galaxy or destroy it in the attempt. "Deploy the experimental fleet. Authorization Chen Alpha Omega." Williams' face went pale. "Admiral, those vessels haven't been tested in combat. The theoretical risks are about to become practical necessities. Deploy them now." Admiral Zethkar watched as new contacts appeared on the tactical display.
The experimental human vessels emerging from hyperspace defied every principle of ship design he'd ever encountered. Some appeared to be constructed entirely of energy. Others seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. A few looked like they were built from crystallized spacetime itself. "Admiral Chen, what exactly are those vessels?" "The products of humanity's most dangerous research projects," Sarah replied. "Ships built using technologies we discovered but were afraid to use. Until now." The largest of the experimental vessels was something called the UHSF Paradox. Instead of conventional armor, it was protected by temporal shields that moved incoming attacks backward through time, causing enemy weapons to strike before they were fired. Its main weapon was a device that created localized Big Bangs,
essentially using the universe's creation event as ammunition.
Another vessel, the UHSF Probability, operated on quantum mechanics principles that allowed it to exist in multiple states simultaneously. When attacked, it could simply choose to be in a state where the attack had missed, making it effectively invulnerable to any weapon that relied on hitting a specific target. The most disturbing experimental ship was the UHSF Ouroboros, which powered itself by consuming alternate versions of itself from parallel universes. Its weapons fired concentrated paradoxes that caused enemy ships to logically cease existing. These ships, Admiral Zethkar said slowly, they're not just advanced technology. They're impossibilities made manifest.
Yes, Sarah agreed. And, we're about to find out if impossibility can defeat inevitability.
The main Voidling fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of cosmic locusts. Their biomechanical ships had evolved during the journey, incorporating defenses against every tactic humanity had displayed. Some vessels showed evidence of quantum shielding, others had developed temporal resistance, and the largest ships appeared to be protected by localized reality fields that would resist physics modification.
They've adapted to our tactics, observed Lieutenant Torres.
Their ships are showing resistance to nanobots, gravitational weapons, antimatter attacks, and dimensional targeting.
Sarah studied the enemy formation.
The Voidlings had learned from every previous engagement and built specific countermeasures. They were fighting like humans now, adapting, evolving, refusing to repeat failed strategies.
Then, we'll have to teach them why adapting to fight humans is a mistake, she said.
All ships, prepare for engagement pattern Zulu Impossible. Admiral, Commander Williams interrupted, engagement pattern Zulu Impossible is purely theoretical.
It's never been attempted outside of computer simulations.
Williams, we're about to fight a battle where the existence of the galaxy depends on the outcome.
This is not the time for conservative tactics. She opened the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Chen.
The enemy has learned our tactics and developed countermeasures. They believe they've adapted to fight humans effectively.
The tactical display showed the massive Voidling fleet arranging itself in formations designed to counter human unpredictability.
Their biomechanical ships pulsed with adaptive energy, ready to evolve new defenses as needed.
What they don't understand is that human tactics aren't just about being unpredictable. They're about being unpredictably unpredictable.
Today, we're going to show them the difference. The human fleet split into 17 different formations, each one operating under completely different tactical doctrines. Some groups used conventional space warfare, while others employed tactics that seemed designed by insane philosophers. The experimental vessels began operations that challenged the fundamental nature of existence itself.
The Voidlings responded as expected, rapidly developing countermeasures for each human tactic they encountered.
Their biomechanical technology evolved at incredible speed, creating new defenses and weapons to match every human strategy.
Which was exactly what Sarah had been counting on.
All ships, initiate Metatactics Protocol 7, she ordered.
Begin implementation of the Penrose Gambit. The Penrose Gambit was humanity's most abstract tactical concept, a strategy that used the enemy's adaptability against them.
Instead of trying to overcome Voidling evolution, the human fleet began feeding them tactical problems that had no solutions. Ships began using weapons that were simultaneously effective and ineffective against the same target. Formations adopted movement patterns that were both logical and illogical at the same time. The experimental vessels started existing in states that violated the basic principles of existence. The Voidling fleet tried to adapt, their biomechanical systems struggling to develop countermeasures for tactics that contradicted themselves. Ships began developing paradoxical defenses that protected against attacks while simultaneously making them more vulnerable. Admiral, reported Torres, the enemy fleet is showing signs of systematic failure. Their adaptive systems are creating contradictory solutions to the same problems.
Sarah nodded with satisfaction.
The Voidlings' greatest strength is their ability to evolve perfect countermeasures. But there are some problems that can't be solved through evolution, problems that actually become worse when you try to adapt to them. Their ships are beginning to tear themselves apart, observed Commander Williams. The contradictory adaptations are creating cascading system failures.
Admiral Zethkar watched in amazement as the massive Voidling fleet began to consume itself.
Ships that had survived quantum erasure and reality modification were being destroyed by their own defensive systems. The biomechanical hulls that had evolved to counter human tactics were evolving contradictory solutions that cancelled each other out.
Admiral Chen, he called out, I've never seen anything like this. You're not just defeating them, you're making them defeat themselves. Sarah's expression remained focused on the tactical display, where the Voidling fleet was spiraling into chaos. Admiral Zethkar, this is what happens when a species that values perfect adaptation encounters a species that values perfect chaos. The Voidlings can evolve to counter any specific threat, but they can't evolve to counter the concept of impossibility itself. The battle continued for another hour as the remaining Voidling forces tried desperately to find tactical solutions that wouldn't destroy their own ships. Every adaptation they attempted created new vulnerabilities. Every evolution spawned new contradictions. Finally, the surviving Voidling vessels began to retreat, fleeing toward the edge of the galaxy with their biomechanical hulls flickering between dozens of incompatible adaptations. They had learned a lesson that would echo through their collective consciousness: humanity was not just another species to be consumed, but a force of pure chaos that could not be reasoned with, adapted to, or defeated through conventional means. All ships, stand down from combat alert, Sarah ordered as the last enemy contacts disappeared from the tactical display. Damage reports and casualty assessments. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres reported, we've lost approximately 3,000 vessels during the engagement. Casualties are still being tallied, but initial reports suggest lighter losses than projected. 3,000 ships and their crews, a significant price for victory, but far less than the total extinction they had prevented. Admiral Chen, Admiral Zethkar called out, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Coalition and every species in this galaxy, I want to express our gratitude. Humanity has accomplished what our combined civilizations could not. Sarah looked at the alien admiral's image on the screen, noting the mixture of relief and confusion in his alien features. Admiral Zethkar, we didn't save the galaxy for gratitude. We saved it because that's what humans do when faced with extinction, we find a way to win. 3 weeks after the Battle of the Galactic Core, Admiral Sarah Chen found herself in the most surreal situation of her military career, sitting in a diplomatic conference room aboard the Coalition flagship, trying to explain humanity to representatives of 47 different alien species. The meeting had been Admiral Zethkar's idea. Word of humanity's victory over the Voidlings had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and every major civilization wanted to understand how a primitive species had accomplished what the combined might of the Coalition could not. Sarah studied the assembled delegates with interest. She recognized a few species from Earth's limited xenological databases, but most were completely new to human experience. Some looked like variations on familiar animal forms, while others appeared to be living crystals, energy beings, or geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Chen, began Ambassador Clix of the Arcturus Federation, her translator rendering her crystalline voice in crisp English, we have studied the tactical recordings of your battle with the Voidlings. Your strategies appear to violate several fundamental principles of military science. Sarah nodded. She had expected this question. Ambassador, which principles specifically? The conservation of tactical resources, for one. Your forces expended energy and material at rates that should have left you defenseless within hours. The logical deployment of superior technology, for another. Your most advanced vessels were used in support roles while primitive craft led primary assault formations. And, most confusingly, added Representative Vorth of the Spiral Confederacy, his tentacles writhing with obvious agitation, your tactical decisions appeared to prioritize unpredictability over effectiveness. Military doctrine teaches us to use proven strategies, not experimental gambits. Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering how to explain concepts that humans took for granted to species that had never faced existential warfare. Representatives, I think the core misunderstanding is this: you're assuming that military doctrine is designed to win battles efficiently. Human military doctrine is designed to win wars at any cost. The distinction is unclear, observed the delegate from the crystal mines of Sapphira, her thoughts forming visible patterns in the air around her head. Warfare consists of battles. Winning battles efficiently should result in winning wars efficiently. Not when you're always the underdog, Sarah replied. Humanity has spent our entire history fighting enemies with superior numbers, technology, or resources. We learned early that efficiency is a luxury we couldn't afford. When your survival depends on victory, you focus on winning regardless of cost or conventional wisdom. Admiral Zethkar leaned forward, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Admiral Chen, could you provide a specific example? Perhaps from human history? Sarah thought for a moment. During our Second World War, the nation of Britain faced an enemy with superior air power, ground forces, and naval capability.
Conventional military doctrine would have suggested negotiated surrender to preserve resources and population.
She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's continents.
Instead, Britain chose to continue fighting alone for over a year, using tactics that their enemy considered wasteful and irrational.
They evacuated their entire army from France in civilian fishing boats.
They used merchant sailors to transport military supplies through submarine-infested waters. They taught civilians to fight with kitchen knives and garden tools.
That seems inefficient, commented Ambassador Clicks. The resource expenditure alone was irrelevant, Sarah interrupted. Because the alternative was extinction as a free society.
The British understood something that military theorists often miss: when your existence is at stake, efficiency becomes less important than persistence. She highlighted several points on the map. The Germans had superior technology, better training, and overwhelming numerical advantages. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat even when defeat was mathematically certain. Every irrational British tactic forced the Germans to commit resources they couldn't afford to lose. Representative Vortha's tentacles stilled.
You used inefficiency as a weapon.
Exactly. The Germans planned for a rational enemy that would surrender when defeat became inevitable.
Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that redefined inevitable.
The assembled delegates exchanged glances, their various forms of nonverbal communication creating a symphony of clicks, color changes, and electromagnetic fluctuations. Sarah could sense their struggle to understand a mindset so fundamentally different from their own. "This explains your tactical choices against the Voidlings," Admiral Zefkar said slowly.
"You weren't trying to defeat them efficiently. You were trying to defeat them impossibly." The Voidlings had evolved to counter logical military strategies, Sarah confirmed. Every weapon system, every defensive measure, every tactical formation in their arsenal was designed to overcome rational opposition.
But they had never encountered an opponent whose primary strategy was to be strategically irrational. Ambassador Yith of the nomadic fleet spoke for the first time, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested advanced age. "This approach, it must be psychologically damaging to your species. To constantly prepare for impossible odds, to train your military forces to embrace potentially suicidal tactics."
Sarah considered the observation carefully.
"It certainly shaped our culture in ways that other species might find disturbing. Human literature is filled with stories celebrating last stands, impossible victories, and Pyrrhic triumphs. We have cultural heroes who are remembered not for their successes, but for their refusal to surrender in hopeless situations." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed images from human military history. "We celebrate the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, who chose to die rather than retreat. We honor the defenders of the Alamo, who fought to the death knowing they couldn't win. We remember the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where civilians fought against overwhelming military force with improvised weapons. These examples all describe defeats," noted the Crystal Mind delegate, her thought patterns showing confusion.
"Why does your species celebrate failure?" "Because they weren't failures," Sarah replied. "Each of those defeats accomplished something that victory couldn't have achieved. The Spartans demonstrated that the supposedly invincible Persian army could be resisted. The Alamo defenders gave their nation time to organize effective resistance. The Warsaw Uprising proved that the human spirit couldn't be completely crushed even under the worst conditions." She paused, studying the faces and forms around the table. "Every species in this room comes from a civilization that achieved spaceflight through logical progression, developing technology, forming stable governments, expanding gradually into space. Humanity achieved spaceflight while actively trying to destroy itself in global wars." "Which explains your ships," Admiral Zefkar observed. "We wondered why your vessels appear to be designed for combat against other human vessels rather than exploration or trade." "Because they are," Sarah confirmed. "Every human ship is built on the assumption that it will eventually face an enemy with equivalent or superior technology. We design our weapons to penetrate our own defenses, then improve our defenses to stop our own weapons, then design better weapons to overcome the improved defenses." Representative Vortha's tentacles began moving in patterns that suggested fascination. "You are trapped in an evolutionary arms race with yourselves." "Not trapped, empowered. When we encountered voidling technology that could erase matter at the quantum level, we already had shields designed to stop weapons that unmade reality itself.
When they used temporal attacks, we had defenses against time manipulation. When they employed multidimensional tactics, we had weapons that could target enemies across parallel universes. Ambassador Clix leaned forward, her crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. You prepared for every conceivable threat because humans are every conceivable threat. Humanity's greatest enemy has always been humanity, Sarah agreed. Which means we've had extensive practice fighting opponents who think like us, adapt like us, and refuse to give up like us. The Voidlings were formidable, but they were still more predictable than humans.
The room fell silent as the implications sank in.
These alien civilizations had achieved peace and prosperity through cooperation and logical development. They had built the coalition on principles of unity and mutual support. The idea of a species that had weaponized its own internal conflicts was both fascinating and terrifying.
Admiral Chen, Ambassador Yith said finally, your species presents the galaxy with an interesting dilemma.
You have proven capable of protecting us from threats we cannot handle ourselves. But, your very nature suggests that you might become such a threat yourselves.
Sarah had been expecting this concern. Ambassador, I understand your worry. From your perspective, humanity must seem like a collection of barely controlled berserkers with weapons that can rewrite reality.
She stood, activating a new set of holographic displays that showed human civilian activities, cities, universities, art museums, children playing in parks. But, consider this, a species that spends all its time preparing for war tends to be very motivated to avoid actually fighting wars.
We know better than anyone how destructive we can be.
The images shifted to show human diplomatic efforts, peacekeeping missions, and humanitarian aid operations. Humans are violent, chaotic, and militaristic.
We're also explorers, artists, philosophers, and scientists.
We write poetry about the beauty of stars while designing weapons to destroy them.
We compose symphonies celebrating peace while engineering technologies for war.
The contradiction seems unstable, observed the Crystal Mind delegate.
The contradiction is what makes us human, Sarah replied.
We are simultaneously the most destructive and most creative species we know of. We can build weapons that unmake reality, and we can create art that captures the essence of existence itself. She gestured toward the viewport, where the galaxy stretched out in all its brilliant complexity. The Voidlings represented pure destruction, consumption without purpose, expansion without meaning.
They couldn't understand why anyone would risk everything to protect something as chaotic as galactic civilization. And humanity? Asked Admiral Zethkar. Humanity understands that chaos is worth protecting precisely because it's chaotic.
We fight impossible battles not because we enjoy war, but because we believe there are things worth dying for. Freedom, beauty, the right to exist on your own terms, these concepts are worth any sacrifice. Sarah returned to her seat, noting the thoughtful expressions on the various alien faces around her.
Representatives, I can't promise that humanity will never pose a threat to galactic civilization. We're too unpredictable for anyone to make that guarantee.
But, I can promise that as long as threats like the Voidlings exist, you'll never find better allies than humans.
Ambassador Clix spoke after a long moment of consideration. Admiral Chen, the coalition has voted to offer humanity full membership and representation in our governing council. We hope that your species will consider joining us formally.
Sarah felt a surge of pride and concern in equal measure. Humanity had wanted recognition from the galactic community for centuries, but she wondered if either side was truly ready for the complications that full integration would bring. I'll convey your offer to Earth's leadership, she replied diplomatically.
Though I should warn you that getting humans to agree on anything involving galactic governance will be challenging. More challenging than fighting the Voidlings, asked Representative Vorth with what might have been humor. Sarah considered the question seriously.
Representative, I helped coordinate 50,000 human ships in a battle against impossible odds.
Compared to getting the Earth's governments to agree on diplomatic protocols, that was the easy part.
The alien delegates exchanged what might have been amused glances, though it was difficult to tell with some of the more exotic species present.
Admiral Zethkar said, I have one final question.
When your people received our distress call, you responded immediately despite having no obligation to help us.
Why?
Sarah looked around the table at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, dozens of species that had achieved peace, prosperity, and cooperation on a scale that humanity had never imagined possible.
Admiral Zethkar, humans have spent our entire existence looking up at the stars and wondering if we were alone in the universe.
When we finally learned that the galaxy was full of intelligent life, it didn't matter that you had kept your distance from us or classified us as primitives."
She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The universe is vast and, mostly empty. Life is rare. Intelligent life is rarer still.
Civilizations that value freedom and individual dignity are rarest of all.
When something threatens to destroy that kind of precious rarity, humans don't ask about politics or protocols or proper procedures. We just ask one question: how fast can we get there to help?"
6 months after the Battle of the Galactic Core, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Humanity House on Galactic Central Station, watching the most complex diplomatic catastrophe in recorded history unfold in real time. Earth's governments had responded to the Coalition's membership offer with characteristic human logic. They had sent 47 different diplomatic missions, each claiming to represent humanity's interests, and none of them agreeing on anything except that the others were wrong. "Admiral," called out Ambassador Maria Santos, Earth's supposedly senior diplomatic representative, "the Terran Federation delegation is claiming exclusive negotiation rights again. The African Union is threatening to withdraw from talks entirely, and the Nordic Collective wants to renegotiate every treaty clause that mentions warfare." Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling a headache that had been growing steadily for 3 months.
"What about the Chinese Continental Assembly? They're demanding that all negotiations be conducted in Mandarin, translated into each alien language, then translated back to confirm accuracy. The process is taking 16 hours per paragraph." Through the viewport, Sarah could see the Coalition diplomatic station in all its impossible glory. Crystalline spires twisted through dimensions that hurt human eyes to follow, while energy beings danced between structures that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. It was the most beautiful and incomprehensible thing humans had ever seen. It was also about to become the site of the most spectacular diplomatic failure in galactic history. "Ambassador Santos, what's the current status of the Coalition Council's patience with our process? Admiral Zethkar sent a private message this morning.
Apparently, 17 different species have requested emergency sessions to discuss the human question.
3 civilizations have threatened to leave the Coalition if humanity is granted membership. 2 others have threatened to leave if we're not." Sarah had been expecting this development.
Humans had saved the galaxy, but that didn't mean the galaxy was ready to live with humans on a permanent basis. The species that made up the Coalition had achieved peace through careful diplomacy and logical compromise.
Humanity's approach to problem-solving seemed to give most of them nervous breakdowns. "Any word from Earth Command on unified representation?" The Secretary General's office sent a message saying that forcing Earth's governments to choose a single representative would violate the principles of democratic self-determination that humanity fought to protect.
"So we're going to democracy ourselves out of galactic membership?"
"It appears so, Admiral." Sarah activated her personal communicator. "Admiral Chen to Admiral Zethkar. Request immediate private meeting. Location, neutral territory."
The response came within minutes.
"Admiral Chen, I would be honored to meet with you. Suggest observation platform 7 in 1 hour."
Sarah made her way through the station's corridors, marveling at the engineering that allowed dozens of incompatible life support systems to operate in the same structure.
Gravity fields shifted smoothly as she moved between sections designed for different species. Atmospheric composition changed gradually to accommodate beings that breathed everything from methane to liquid helium. She found Admiral Zethkar waiting on a platform that offered a spectacular view of the galaxy's edge, where stars faded into the cosmic dark that had once hidden the voidling threat. "Admiral Chen," he greeted her, his mandibles clicking in what she had learned was amusement. "I must admit, your species continues to surprise us. We expected that defeating the voidlings would be the difficult part of integrating humanity into galactic civilization."
Sarah joined him at the platform's edge, looking out at the stars that humanity had risked everything to protect.
"Admiral, I need to ask you something honestly. Does the Coalition actually want humanity as members, or are you just feeling obligated because we saved everyone?"
Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on her with obvious surprise.
"Admiral Chen, that's a remarkably direct question. Humans are remarkably direct. Answer honestly."
The alien admiral was quiet for several minutes, his chitinous form silhouetted against the starfield. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Admiral Chen, the coalition has existed for over 1,000 years based on a simple principle: intelligent species can achieve more through cooperation than conflict. Every member civilization reached spaceflight through peaceful development and logical progression. He gestured toward the diplomatic station behind them. Our governmental systems are designed for species that value consensus, stability, and predictable outcomes. Our trade agreements assume that all parties will act rationally in their own long-term interests. Our military alliances are built on the assumption that wars are unfortunate accidents that can be prevented through proper communication.
Sarah nodded.
And then, humanity shows up. And then, humanity shows up, he agreed.
A species that achieved spaceflight while actively trying to destroy itself.
A civilization that builds weapons capable of erasing reality while simultaneously creating art that captures the essence of beauty itself. A military force that treats impossible odds as minor tactical inconveniences. He turned to face her directly.
Admiral Chen, humanity represents everything the coalition was designed to avoid. Chaos over order, instinct over logic, passionate commitment over rational calculation.
Sarah felt her heart sink. She had suspected this conversation was coming, but hearing it confirmed still hurt.
So the answer is no. The coalition doesn't want us.
The coalition is terrified of you, Zethkar replied.
And we have never wanted anything more. Sarah blinked, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, what? Admiral Chen, do you know what the coalition's greatest fear was before the Voidling invasion?
I assumed it was war, or resource depletion, or
stagnation, Zethkar interrupted.
We had achieved perfect peace, perfect cooperation, perfect predictability. Our civilizations were so stable that they had stopped evolving. Our technologies were so advanced that there were no new frontiers to explore. Our societies were so harmonious that there were no challenges to overcome. He gestured again toward the stars. We had created a galactic civilization that was dying of its own success. Every problem had been solved, every question had been answered, every frontier had been mapped. We were becoming a galaxy of living museums, preserved in amber of our own making.
Sarah felt her understanding shift as the implications became clear.
And then, we showed up and everything became chaotic again.
Exactly.
In 6 months, humanity has generated more scientific breakthroughs, artistic innovations, and philosophical debates than the coalition had seen in the previous century.
Your diplomatic chaos has forced us to re-examine governmental systems we hadn't questioned in millennia. Your military tactics have revolutionized our understanding of strategic thinking. Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly, indicating either amusement or distress. 3 civilizations have threatened to leave the coalition because of humanity's influence. But 12 others have established new research initiatives inspired by human unpredictability. The crystal minds have begun studying human art to understand how chaos can create beauty. The Spiral Confederacy is redesigning their ships based on human irrational engineering principles. We're forcing you to grow again, Sarah realized.
Admiral Chen, your species represents everything that our civilizations abandoned in pursuit of peace and stability.
Passion over logic, creativity over efficiency, courage over caution. We thought these were primitive traits that intelligent species would naturally outgrow.
He paused, his 4 eyes reflecting the light of distant stars.
The Voidling invasion taught us that sometimes primitive traits are exactly what the universe needs. When perfect logic and advanced technology failed, human chaos succeeded. When our unity became weakness, your diversity became strength. Sarah considered this perspective, thinking about the implications for both species. Admiral, what are you saying exactly?
I'm saying that the coalition needs humanity far more than humanity needs the coalition. We have spent so long being civilized that we forgot how to be alive. Your species reminds us what we lost in our pursuit of perfection. He activated a holographic display showing star charts marked with recent human activities. In the past 6 months, human exploration teams have discovered 47 new stellar phenomena that our scientists classified as impossible. Human artists have created works that forced us to develop new aesthetic theories. Human diplomats have proposed solutions to 1,000-year-old territorial disputes that none of us had considered. Sarah studied the display, noting the chaotic pattern of human expansion across previously unexplored regions.
We're not following your exploration protocols, are we? Admiral Chen, your people are exploring regions that our computers predicted would be empty based on 1 million years of astronomical data. You found 3 new forms of intelligent life that shouldn't exist according to our models of biological development. You've established first contact with civilizations that our anthropologists said were too alien for meaningful communication. Because we didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. Exactly.
Humanity's greatest strength is your species' refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. You approach every problem as if it has a solution, every challenge as if it can be overcome, every barrier as if it exists to be broken. Zethkar deactivated the display and turned back toward the diplomatic station.
Admiral Chen, the Coalition is going through the most significant transformation in our recorded history, and it's entirely because of human influence. We are remembering what it means to take risks, to embrace uncertainty, to value growth over stability. Sarah felt a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. And you're terrified that we'll destroy everything you've built in the process. Absolutely. But we're more terrified of what we might become without you. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the galaxy spread out before them like a promise of infinite possibility. Finally, Sarah spoke. Admiral, I think I have a solution to our diplomatic problem. I'm listening. The Coalition has been trying to integrate humanity into your existing governmental structures. But maybe the solution is to create something new instead. She pulled up her own holographic display, showing a rough organizational chart that she had been developing for weeks. What if we established a parallel structure? Keep the Coalition Council for civilizations that value stability and consensus. Create a new body, call it the Galactic Frontier Alliance, for species that thrive on chaos and exploration. Zethkar studied the proposed structure with obvious interest. A dual governmental system? One for order, one for chaos? With humanity serving as the bridge between them, Sarah continued. We understand both approaches because we've used both approaches throughout our history. Some human governments could join the Coalition directly, while others could help establish the Frontier Alliance. And, when crises arise that require both approaches, we coordinate our responses. The Coalition provides stability, organization, and resources. The Frontier Alliance provides adaptability, innovation, and the willingness to attempt impossible solutions. Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the implications. Admiral Chen, this could revolutionize galactic governance. Instead of trying to achieve unity through uniformity, we could achieve cooperation through complementary diversity. It would mean accepting that different species need different governmental structures, Sarah warned. No more assumption that every civilization will eventually evolve toward the same model. Which is exactly the kind of revolutionary thinking that the Coalition needs to embrace. Sarah felt optimism rising for the first time in months. Think it will work? Admiral Chen, 6 months ago I would have said that your proposal was too chaotic to function effectively. Today, I understand that chaos might be exactly what galactic civilization needs to survive and grow. He turned toward her with what she was beginning to recognize as determination in his alien features. Admiral, I'm going to propose this to the Coalition Council. But, I want you to know that regardless of their response, humanity has already changed us in ways that can't be reversed. Changed you how? We're dreaming again, Zethkar said simply. For the first time in centuries, the species of the Coalition are imagining futures that are different from their presents. They're asking questions that don't have predetermined answers. They're taking risks that might fail spectacularly. He gestured toward the galaxy beyond the station. Before humanity arrived, we had mapped every star, catalogued every phenomenon, and explained every mystery. The universe had become predictable. And, now we realize that the universe is vast enough to contain infinite surprises, and we have a species ally that specializes in finding them. Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking about the future that humanity and the Coalition might build together. It wouldn't be the peaceful, orderly civilization that the aliens had created, nor would it be the chaotic, conflict-prone society that humans had always known. It would be something new entirely, a galactic community that valued both stability and change, both logic and intuition, both peace and the willingness to fight for what mattered. Admiral Zethkar, she said finally, I think we're about to make the universe a much more interesting place. Admiral Chen, he replied, his mandibles clicking with what she now recognized as anticipation, I believe that's exactly what the universe has been waiting for. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, unchanging and eternal. But, the civilizations that looked up at those stars were about to embark on an adventure that would redefine what it meant to be alive in an infinite cosmos. Humanity had answered a distress call and saved the galaxy. Now they were going to do something far more dangerous. They were going to help it grow.